The night after the red spray paint appeared, Sarah barely slept. Every creak in the house made her flinch. Every gust of wind against the windows sounded like footsteps. Daniel stayed awake, watching the monitors from their security cameras, eyes red with exhaustion. When morning came, the paint was still there, get out now, glaring like a wound across their lawn. But what terrified Sarah more wasn't the vandalism. It was the silence that followed. Not a single neighbor came to ask what happened. Not one. The same people who used to wave from across the street now crossed the road to avoid them. By noon, a white envelope appeared in their mailbox, stamped with the HOA's seal. Daniel tore it open. Notice of hearing, it read, regarding property violations and conduct unbecoming of a homeowner. They were summoned to appear before the board. For 7 quiet years, Sarah and her husband Daniel had called Willow Creek home, a neighborhood so peaceful it almost felt like a postcard. Every morning, Sarah would wave to Mrs. Langley trimming her roses, jog past the lake with her golden retriever, and stop for coffee at the corner café where everyone knew her name. Their small blue house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac lined with neatly cut lawns, American flags, and the soft hum of sprinklers at sunrise. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. They'd saved for years to buy this home, drawn by the promise of a close-knit community and a homeowners association that kept everything in order. At first, that sounded reassuring. Friendly neighbors, shared events, and a sense of pride in keeping the place beautiful. But underneath the manicured hedges and cheerful smiles, there were rules. So many rules. The kind of rules no one really paid attention to, until someone decided to enforce them. It started subtly. A note about the color of their mailbox. Then a reminder about their garden fence being half an inch too tall. At first, Sarah laughed it off, thinking it was just part of living in a neighborhood with an HOA. But Daniel noticed something else. The way a few board members whispered at meetings when they walked in. The way neighbors stopped waving when he drove by. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Sarah found a bright yellow notice taped to their front door. The message was polite but cold. A formal warning about violations and a fine that made her stomach turn. She read it twice, her hands trembling. "They can't be serious," she whispered. Daniel took the paper, his jaw tightening. "Oh, they're serious," he said quietly. That's when Sarah realized this wasn't about a mailbox or a fence. Something deeper was brewing in Willow Creek, and soon the neighborhood that once felt like a dream would turn into their worst nightmare. The hearing was scheduled for Friday evening, inside the same beige clubhouse where it all began. The moment Sarah and Daniel walked in, every head turned. The entire board was there. Linda at the center, flanked by her loyal members, papers stacked neatly in front of her like weapons. A small crowd of residents filled the back rows, murmuring quietly. The air felt heavy, electric. Linda's smile was razor-sharp. "Thank you for coming. Let's begin." She opened a folder and started listing their violations, one after another. Unauthorized landscaping, improper fence maintenance, unapproved security cameras, and she added with a deliberate pause, harassment of board members. Daniel's jaw tightened. "We're the ones being harassed." Linda ignored him. "You've been warned multiple times, yet you've continued to defy the standards of this community." Then she looked up, her tone turning syrupy. "The board has voted unanimously to proceed with a lien against your property for unpaid fines and conduct violations. You'll receive notice within 72 hours. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, even a few smirks. Sarah stood, her voice trembling but firm. "You can't do that. We've paid every fine. We have proof." Linda folded her hands. "Then you should have kept better records." That's when Sarah did something no one expected. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick binder, the one labeled Evidence. "Actually," she said, setting it on the table, "we did." The room fell silent. Sarah opened the binder and began to lay out documents, photocopies of checks, dated receipts, emails, and letters. She flipped through the pages with deliberate precision, her voice steady. "These are the fines we paid," she said. "Here are the receipts your office issued. Here's the confirmation from the HOA portal. And here, she slid a photo across the table, is video footage from our camera showing someone on your board taking photos of our property at night. Without consent, Linda's smile faltered. Daniel leaned forward. You've been using fake violations to pressure us into leaving. That's extortion. A murmur rippled through the room. Linda straightened, trying to recover. That's a serious accusation, Daniel. So is fraud, he shot back. And we've already sent everything to our lawyer. The color drained from her face. Bill Crane, the uneasy board member, shifted in his seat, his eyes darting between Linda and Sarah. Finally, he spoke. They're telling the truth. I saw the records. Those fines shouldn't exist. Bill, Linda snapped. You're out of line. No, he said, standing up. You are. The room froze. He turned to the homeowners in the back. Linda's been using the HOA to settle personal grudges. She's been manipulating complaints, deleting payments, and threatening anyone who questions her. The crowd erupted, shouting, gasping, whispering. Linda slammed her gavel down. That's enough, order. But the room was no longer hers. Daniel stepped closer to the table, placing a printed document in front of her. Here's the kicker, Linda. These meeting minutes you tried to hide? They show that you authorized a private security company to monitor our property, using HOA funds. Without a vote. Her hands trembled as she scanned the page. That's not true. Sarah pulled out her phone. Then maybe you should explain this. She pressed play on a video. Footage from their security camera showing a man in a reflective vest sneaking through their yard with a flashlight. The same logo visible on his jacket, Rayburn Security Consulting. Linda's maiden name. The crowd went silent again. Then came the whispers. She hired her own company. With our money? Is that even legal? Linda's voice cracked. That's taken out of context. Bill looked disgusted. Context? You paid yourself to spy on homeowners. For the first time in months, Sarah felt the power shift. The fear that had weighed on her chest for so long began to loosen. She saw it in the faces around her. Neighbors she once thought had turned against her now staring at Linda with disbelief and anger. Daniel spoke again, calm but cutting. We're done being intimidated. You can't bully families, threaten their homes, and hide behind fake rules. Not anymore. Linda tried to speak, but her voice was drowned by murmurs of outrage. Sarah closed her binder slowly. You wanted us gone. But now everyone sees why. Then came the final blow. From the back of the room, a woman stood up. One of the residents Sarah barely knew. She held a printed document. I got this from the county records office, she said, her voice trembling. The lien paperwork? It was already filed, before this hearing even happened. All eyes turned to Linda. Sarah's heart pounded. You filed it early? You'd already decided. Linda's mask cracked completely. Because it was obvious you'd never change. You're ruining this neighborhood. You— Enough, Bill interrupted sharply. You're done, Linda. He turned to the crowd. I motioned to remove her from the board effective immediately. A stunned silence. Then another board member, hesitating, raised her hand. Seconded. Linda's gavel clattered to the table. You can't— But the vote had already begun. One by one, hands went up. When it was over, only Linda's stayed down. The courtroom was cold and imposing, every surface gleaming under harsh overhead lights. Sarah and Daniel sat beside their lawyer, faces tense but determined. Across the aisle, Mr. Langford and the HOA representatives sat rigid, emotionless, papers stacked high before them. The judge entered and the room fell silent. The hearing began with a series of formal statements, each word echoing off the polished walls. Sarah felt her hands tremble but refused to let it show. Every argument Linda had made in previous meetings was systematically dismantled by their lawyer. Evidence meticulously laid out, receipts, emails, even the video footage of the private security company in action. Linda's confident smirk faded with each piece of proof, replaced by a rising panic. Daniel's jaw tightened as he watched her falter, years of intimidation boiling into a silent rage. The judge leaned forward, scanning pages, eyes narrowing. Given the evidence presented, the judge finally said, the lien on the Bennett property is null and void. All fines are rescinded. Relief surged, but it was tempered by exhaustion. They had won, yet the weight of the battle lingered heavily in the air. Outside the courthouse, rain poured down, drenching Sarah as she stumbled to the sidewalk, tears mixing with raindrops. Her body shook, not from the cold, but from weeks of pent-up fear, frustration, and emotional strain finally erupting. Daniel wrapped an arm around her shoulders, steadying her, but not taking away her moment. The courthouse loomed behind them, imposing and gray, a symbol of both the fight they endured and the victory they earned. Sarah buried her face into Daniel's chest, sobs racking her body, feeling the weight of the nightmare lift little by little. Lightning flashed faintly in the distance, mirroring the chaos and intensity of the past months. For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge the sheer magnitude of what they had survived. The constant harassment, the fear, the threats, and the sleepless nights. Yet, in that breakdown, there was release, a catharsis that washed over her like the storm around them. Daniel's quiet presence grounded her, a reminder that they had endured together, that they were still standing. Back home, Sarah approached the mailbox with cautious hope. Her hand trembled as she opened it, revealing a crisp, official-looking envelope from the court. Bold letters stamped across the front read, "Case dismissed." Relief washed over her in a tidal wave, disbelief mingling with joy. She held the paper close, reading it twice to ensure it was real. Daniel emerged from the porch, watching her with a mixture of pride and quiet satisfaction. "It's finally over," he said, his voice calm but heavy with emotion. Sarah let out a shaky laugh, the tension of months dissolving in that single moment. Their ordeal had been grueling, but this piece of paper represented more than legal victory. It was validation, vindication, and freedom from the harassment that had poisoned their neighborhood. The sunlight broke through the trees, illuminating the small yard, bathing it in warmth that had been absent for far too long. For the first time, their home felt safe again. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and Daniel made the difficult decision to leave Willow Creek. The scars of the battle remained, both on the property and in their minds. A wide shot captured their small blue house with a "For Sale" sign standing resolutely in the yard. A moving truck idled nearby, ready to carry away their belongings. The golden hour light stretched long shadows across the manicured lawns, casting a bittersweet glow over the scene. Sarah and Daniel stood hand in hand, watching their home one last time. Though they were leaving behind memories, both joyous and painful, they felt a quiet sense of closure. The neighborhood that had once promised serenity had delivered lessons in resilience, courage, and the cost of speaking truth to power. Their eyes met, a shared understanding passing silently between them. Endings are painful, but they also create space for beginnings. Driving down an open country road in their SUV, sunlight streaming through the windshield, Sarah and Daniel felt a profound sense of liberation. The Willow Creek neighborhood receded in the rearview mirror, a chapter finally closing behind them. Their faces were calm, hopeful, framed by the wide expanse of sky and the winding road ahead. The tension, fear, and frustration that had defined the past months gradually lifted, replaced by anticipation for the future. They spoke little, allowing the silence and the open road to speak for them. Freedom had never felt so tangible. The lessons from Willow Creek, courage, perseverance, and the power of truth, were etched into their hearts. As the vehicle carried them further away, the promise of a fresh start shimmered in the sunlight, each mile marking not just a physical distance but an emotional release. They were free, they were together, and for the first time in a long while they felt at peace.